There we go. So welcome, everybody. My name is Ken Posner. I'm the race director for the SRT. I'm also a board member for Run Wild, and Run Wild is the not-for-profit organization. We have about 5 or 6 races, including the SRT, Cat's Tail, Manitou's Revenge, the Cantico Hills and Rockefeller State Park Preserve, and we have a new race, which we had for the first time this year, Fabulous Faunastock. And our goal is to harness the enthusiasm of runners to help preserve more land in the Hudson Valley. And so we made contributions to help with land acquisition and also to contribute to organizations that are providing the stewardship for the land. And with respect to the SRT, obviously, like any race, we'd like to make it an inclusive and welcoming event and get as many people as possible of all types to experience the Shawangunk Mountains. And I noticed in social media, somebody made a post a few weeks ago, and they pointed out that there had been relatively fewer women than men participating in the race. And I went back and checked the numbers, and that's actually correct. Women have made up about 15% of the 70-mile starters. And so we thought we'd have a call both to, ask the question, are there aspects of the event that are more challenging or less appealing to women? But, also possibly just to encourage more women to participate. And so that's the reason that that we're sort of gathered together today. And I will also comment for other folks on the call. This call is open to anybody, and so we have a few questions for the panel, but then we'll take any questions from anybody online. And it could be about any aspect of the race. It doesn't have to be about, sex or gender or orientation. It could be about training or navigation or anything else. And so with that, I'm going to be mostly in listen mode, but I'm happy to respond on behalf of, organizers and Run Wild. I'm going to turn the call over to our moderator, Katie Rhodes. And just by very quick introduction, Katie ran the 70-mile division in 2021 and won it and set the current women's record of 19, I believe it's 19 hours and 12 minutes. Mm-hmm. Katie is also well known for having set a record in the Adirondacks with Bethany Gerritsen. Mm-hmm. And you guys went out and through hiked the Adirondack 46 in 7 days, covering the 46 peaks, and I think it was 175 miles and 60,000 miles of elevation gain. So that's very impressive. I hiked the 46 as well, but it took me 5 years. So with that, Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for that intro. I appreciate it. Yeah, my name's Katie Rhodes. First of all, I just want to extend a big thank you to Ken and Todd and the SRT run, and the fact that their heads are in this place where they're recognizing maybe the, non-intentional inaccessibility of a race like this for specific sets of persons. So addressing this and allowing for this call and just having that mindset, that open mindset to listen to feedback, I think is really critical. And you don't always see that in race directors. So big thank you to you, Ken, for setting this up and for allowing me to moderate. So this is my first time moderating a call. So I fully invite Ken to step in and correct me if I do anything wrong, but we'll give it a go. So yeah, I already got a little bit of a intro, but primarily I consider myself a mountain athlete, a mountain runner. I spend most of my time in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. I'm based out of the Southern Adirondacks, just south of the Blue Line. And right now I'm a graduate student. I'm studying conservation biology, specifically alpine ecology, hoping that my job will actually allow me to just be in the mountains inherently, doing research and studying those spaces and kind of giving back to those spaces. So that's what I'm doing with my life right now. I'm also lucky enough to be a wilderness education instructor with SUNY Potsdam up in Potsdam, New York. And so sadly, I have not been able to run the SRT 70 again since 2021 because my work as a wilderness instructor takes me away just just before the race. And so I'm just not able to have an adequate training block leading up to it. But I do like to stay involved because when I ran the race in 2021, it was just such a wonderful, wholesome experience. And I was actually pretty new to trail running at the time. I came from a strong background of long distance hiking. And I had started running about 6 months before I took this race on. It was my first official trail race. And, just the atmosphere, I felt totally comfortable. I felt confident going in. I felt supported in the right ways and unsupported in the ways that make you feel empowered. And I just had such an amazing experience. And I thought, if only we could get some more women out there. Really, my goal is to get a woman to come beat my course record. I would love to see that happen. So anything I can do to support any of you, convince you to run this race, give it a go, bet on yourself a little bit, and also just support you in training the best way you can, setting yourself up for, having the right gear, that sort of thing. So um, I did want to kick it off by answering one of the questions that I'm going to pose to the panel. So what is the greatest high point and the most challenging part of the SRT 70 from my experience? So personally, the high point for me was leaving checkpoint 3. So when you leave checkpoint 3, you immediately start climbing and eventually you end up at Sam's Point. And I happened to be lucky enough that the sun was rising just as I came up to Sam's Point. And if any of you have been to Sam's Point during the sunrise, it's a pretty spectacular thing. The way that the race is set up, you're actually running into the sunrise. And it was just a really beautiful and spiritual experience for me. I was up there all by myself. I think it was 5 or 6 other runners that get held at checkpoint 3 with me go on ahead. And I was just by myself up there running into the sunrise. So that was a really special moment. The most challenging point for me, I would say, was probably about 30 miles in. There's a brief road section. It's one of the only road sections along the race. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, aren't you rerouting and taking some of that road section away this year, Ken?
We're trying to. We got to buy
Okay.
some land.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, that
But there
sounds like a
are
very small.
well-developed plans underway to try and make that happen.
Okay, yeah, that's wonderful. That for me was the low point. Like I said, it was about 30 miles in. So when I was having a low that early in the race, I was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. But it turns out I just really hate road running. I just wanted to be in the forest again. And as soon as I was, I kind of got back up into a point where I was having a positive experience again. So that's my low and my high. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pass it off to our panelists. So what I'll ask you to do is just kind of introduce yourself, share your high point from your experience in the race, or if you've had multiple, feel free to share more than one. And then the greatest challenge of your race experience. So I don't know if there's anyone specifically that wants to kick us off.
I'm happy to kick us off. I think I was the first woman to participate in the 70 miler, so maybe that's where we'll start. And I remember meeting Melanie during my journey of that race. We were doing the 50 miler then, I believe. Anyway, my name is Anna Pettersson. I participated in the 70 miler the second year the race was run, because the first year it was run, I had done what was then the 20 miler, and I sprained my ankle, and I was hobbling around at the finish line and noticed that there were no women who had participated in the 70 mile distance. So I decided that next year it was going to be me. And it was. And it was me and one other woman that year. And she ended up dropping out at some point. But I did not. So it was a great experience. And I think the high point for me of the race experience was actually not even during the race, but it was how the act and the commitment of preparing for the race made me feel about myself, because it was an incredible commitment. I had never run anything further than those 20 miles when I signed up for the 70 milers. It was an incredible game changer in my training. And the fact that I decided to just do it and go ahead and commit myself to it, even though I had no idea whether I was going to be able to be successful, it was very empowering, just as an act. So it was more of wasn't even the actual running that was the high point, but the act of preparing for it. So that might be a little different than some people. The biggest challenge for me, I think, you were talking about that stretch of road around mile 30. Right after that stretch of road, there's a stretch of forest that for me, always, every time I go that stretch, it feels like a real slog. So it's like, I think it's from mile 30 to mile 34 or something. It's really sort of dark and rocky. And for me, I'm a very slow, I hike most of the distance. And so it was still in the dark, but it was late at night and unpleasant sort of time of night, if you will. And so it just felt like a big slog. And I was very happy to sort of get to Ellenville when that whole section was over and done with. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I'm glad that you brought up, that you kind of consider yourself a hiker, because that's something I think a lot of women look at the distance of this race and think, well, I can't run 70 miles perhaps. But you really can kind of power hike most of this race and get through within the cutoff times. There's some talented hikers out there that get themselves through. So that's just something to consider.
Yeah, I hardly ran any of it, and I participated several years after that, and had my battles with a race, but didn't manage to conquer it again since. But I'm going in again this year, Ken. So we'll see what happens. But but yes, for me, hiking is the greatest. Is what I do for the vast majority of the part.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, who wants to go next?
I'll go next. I feel like it feels like a very natural thing to go after Anna, because the way I signed up for the 70 is I did the 50, and the way I did that is like a female friend of mine signed up for it and was like, come do this with me. And I never ever would have otherwise been like, I can do this, or I should do this. And like, so a woman got me into it, which is cool. And I was suffering pretty badly. And then we ran into Anna, and literally I can see it. That was like, what, 8 years ago? And like, I can still see it like it was yesterday. She was smiling. Like, we talked for a minute. Like, I thought about that interaction for like the next 8 months until I signed up for the 70 mile. Cause I was like, okay, I finished the 50, but like, it felt like unfinished business in like the best of ways. And I think if Anna hadn't been there, like as an example, like I don't think I would have signed up or finished. And that was like really, really special and meaningful. And I still think about that. Like, and sometimes it's like, you didn't give me anything, like you didn't invest weeks of time. It was just a great conversation and you had a great attitude. So it was just like such an example for all of us of like, sometimes it's not these big things we have to do. It can just be like really, really small. Like,
we had a great cup of coffee in the city later.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I just went right into it, but I'm Melanie and I finished the SRT, I want to say like 7 years ago, the 70. And my low point, I'll start with the low point so I can end on the high point, is when I got completely dehydrated and bonked really badly. And my high point was when one of the I would say top runners, Alan, he and I literally, he got really sick. And so he just like took some time out to just like throw up and rest on the side. And he and I started kind of like leapfrogging with each other for like, I want to say like 2 hours. And then at one point we never spoke about it. We just started running together. And for like the last, like, I want to say 30 miles, we finished the race together. And like, that was such a high for me. Like, I was like someone who's technically a much better trail runner than me. Like, it was so great. And it was, we talked about restaurants in New York and like, we just distracted each other. And I just felt like it really, really helped me finish.
That's great. Thank you, Melanie. Yeah, there's something to be said for suffering together that really, it just brings you together, it's a beautiful thing. And such a good point too about, someone who I guess technically is a better, quote unquote, better trail runner. In a race like this, that doesn't always matter. I can't tell you how many talented runners were, up at the front with me for so long, and they pushed too hard for too long, and they just couldn't maintain it. Whereas, if you can find that baseline for yourself, that all day pace, that's where you can kind of pull ahead, keep yourself hydrated, keep yourself fueled. And all of a sudden you're passing these real runners, and you're kind of just hiking along and doing your thing. So that's the great equalizer of this race, I think. Awesome. Who's up next?
I can talk. I just want to kind of go off of what Melanie said. Anna provided quite a bit motivation for me too. So when I signed up, I had almost no trail running experience, almost no ultra experience. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a mom of 4 kids, and the race was in my price range is pretty much what got me signing up for it. Didn't realize what I was getting myself into. And Anna gave me some really good advice. She said, get out there and get on the trails and get a really bright light. Those are probably two extremely good pieces of advice if you live local enough to get out on those trails. And let's see, some of my low points. It rained pretty hard that early morning and I was beyond drenched. My electronics were all fried. And I wanted to DNF. I had gone off trail. I did not have a smartwatch. I was doing everything with a compass and map and kept getting lost. And I was soaked, and the rocks up there when they get wet are very slippery, and had taken a couple of really bad falls. So I was done, and I was gonna call and my husband and come pick me up, except my phone was fried from the rain. So I was stuck. So I got myself back on trail and kept going. There were a couple of, I'd call them trail angels. They were other participants who just came along at the right moments. And I know I came across Anna at one point, even though I actually don't remember talking to her. She said I did talk to her though. And
the Ellenville aid station. I was volunteering that.
Yeah, so you still remember it. And I think I was, yeah, I was really struggling on that trail. But it had the different people not come along when they did, I would not have finished. Just like Melanie was saying, I met Michael Mercer, I believe his last name was. We connected somewhere towards the end of the race and we just helped each other out. I don't think either one of us were fueling correctly and we were both hallucinating, and those hallucinations can be pretty fun actually. But we managed to get to the end together. So I think one of the high points is finishing and just knowing you were able to do that. Like to this day, I still can't believe that I did that. That's pretty amazing to me, at least. I guess some of the other advice I'd share would be if you can afford a smartwatch that has the mapping capabilities, you'd probably have an easier time out there. Because when you're hallucinating and trying to read a map with a compass does not go well. And bring a water filter. I only had iodine pills, and it doesn't seem to matter how much rain we've gotten. The water sources tend to run dry that time of year, and I can still taste the scummy pond water I was drinking because that was all that was there. And I put a lot of iodine in it, and I'm still alive, so I'm probably okay. But if you had a filter, it probably would have gone better.
Well, I'm definitely glad that you're still alive. But I do think that that navigation piece is something we're probably going to hear come up a few times over again in this call, because that seems to be one of the big intimidation factors for not just women, but anyone I really talk to about this race. So we can talk a little bit more about that in the section where we asked for your specific advice. But that was a great kind of, preface to that. So thanks, Jessica. Let's see, who do we have left? Jamie, Lauren, who's up for going next?
I can go. Oh, go ahead.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'm Rebecca Perrotto. I actually was the one that finished last year. And I signed up for this on a whim, probably 2 weeks before the race registration closed. My friend was supposed to be doing Wasatch and ended up not being able to go. It was going to be the same weekend. So him and I decided to attempt this together. Neither one of us had ever done unsupported. And I had never gone anything beyond roughly 65, 67 miles. So this was going to be my longest distance, first time self-supported. So yeah, we just kind of winged it. And I watched all of your Zoom videos. I read an obscene amount of race reports that existed. I calculated all of the elevation. I did all the different distances, pace calculators. Man, I thought for sure I was going to be able to finish this thing in 18 hours. Based on the elevation, I went in probably a little too cocky. thinking that this was runnable. This course is not runnable. So for those that are trail runners that are used to running trails, I had never really seen the trail. I live in central Pennsylvania, so sorry, that's my dog.
It's not mine, Ken.
That's my dog. So I'm only about 20 minutes from the Eastern States course, Eastern States 100. So that's primarily where I train. So I'm used to a ton of elevation. So looking at 70 miles and 1,000 or 11,000 feet of elevation didn't really seem that daunting. And Eastern States is, 22,000 feet. Sorry. So my highlight was obviously daylight. Again, we hit daylight right before checkpoint 3 up on the climb. So we were quite a bit behind you, Katie, which I thought I was going to be able to hit checkpoint 3 by then. And then my ultimate goal was to hit Sam's Point before the 30 milers started. We literally walked up and they ran away. So I think that was good timing. Low point was probably about 2 hours after that, when we were climbing the boulders up on the ridge. I thought that next section after Sam's Point was going to be runnable, and again, it was not. There was a lot of climbing. It was pretty difficult terrain. And then the next highlight will probably be the second you step foot on that rail trail, and you're done.
Yeah, it's always fun to go back and look at the GPS from folks that are, they're hurting pretty bad at the end and they're putting down some 20, 25-minute miles. And then you see them hit the rail trail and all of a sudden.
Your legs work again.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's a beautiful thing when all of a sudden you pop out kind of disoriented and go, oh, I'm almost there. I can do this.
Yeah.
Yep,
Sure.
I know that feeling. Great. Thank you, Rebecca. All right. I think we got 2 left. Jamie, did you want to go next?
Hi, sure. Here, let me put the munchkin down. I'm Jamie. I ran, completed in 2018. Like most of you have all said, it was nothing like I've ever experienced. I also went in thinking a lot of different things. I remember, Ken, I think that I luckily got stuck in your vehicle after I was pacing somebody in Manitou, and they ended up not making the cutoff, and you were wonderful to give us a ride. And I got to chew your ear off for like 30 minutes until we got back and gave me all kinds of great advice about SRT. High points were the people that I met like mid-race. I can't remember who initially said it, but angels. I think I literally said that. There was one person right at the end. I don't think I've ever been that low. And all of a sudden she just came in and just put breath back in my lungs. Like I was literally on the ground crying, and here comes this woman, and it was outstanding. The people in the beginning were amazing. Even the people at the checkpoints, kind, wonderful, generous people. Difficult points. Oh wait, one more high point. Sunrise. You guys have said it before. When the sun rose, oh my gosh, I whipped that headlamp off, and it was just the happiest feeling. I was with 2 gentlemen at the time, and we all just stood around just like in awe. And I think that we're like Rosa Gap Fire Tower, I do believe, when we just got to the top and the sun was rising, and it was just outstanding. Low points, hard times, water filter. I would say more in equal grounds to navigation. Water filter. Get a few of them. Mine disconnected. I kept losing water. And so it was tough. The streams, I'm still getting scolded after 7 years since I've done it. My stomach's not exactly the same. And so I'm still getting scolded about how I didn't filter properly. But watch your water and where you're getting it from in the streams. My lowest point, I think, was maybe like mile 55. The sun was beating down and I was just completely disoriented. And I was stumbling through some of the flattest sections, I think, of the entire course. And I was just alone. I was very alone and very like alone in my thoughts. And so I think advice for that would be remember your mantras. Remember telling yourself like something that's going to really pull you up in that. And yeah, that's the hardest, is I think, is your own mind.
Yeah, that's an awesome reminder. Definitely. I like to remind myself in those moments, like this is where the change happens, you know, because that's kind of why we're all out there, right? Is to change and be better versions of ourselves and get stronger and get more resilient. And when it gets really low like that, that's what I tell myself. This is where the change happens, you know, this is what you wanted. So yeah, that's a great reminder about the mantras. Lauren, I think you are our last panelist.
Okay, so I'm Lauren Coulter. I completed the race in 2022. So that was the year that the hurricane happened the week of the race. And like, I don't know, 6 to 10 miles of the course was underwater. So you were running through the water, I think starting around 20 or something. And so I ran it with one of my best friends. We had prepared like from a food and water standpoint. So we had all the right nutrition. Every water stop we stopped, we refilled with water. So like everything was on point. I feel like it was an epic race. I don't feel like I ever had a low point, even though I started getting blisters at mile 25 and ran for 45 miles with like major blisters from the waterlog. We changed our socks like 3 or 4 times, but now your shoes never dried out, so it never really helped. And it was an epic journey. I feel like it was like such a happy, we had gone into it wanting to go into the pain cave, and we both went there, but we never talked about it at all during the journey. And when we finished, you know, it was just like a complete celebration. So I look at this race with all fondness, and, you know, it's one of those ones that you perfectly executed. Of course you learn from it, but like you finish it and you're like, yeah, I crushed this shit. So bring on the next adventure. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. I love that mindset, you know, just going in, looking to enter the pain cave, accepting that right from the beginning, and, you know, being interested in what's going to happen in there. So, awesome. Well, the unfortunate thing about having great conversations is they eat up a lot of time really quickly. So we're already about halfway through the crawl, but, we do have 2 more questions for each panelist. And if each person wants to take maybe just like 2 or 3 minutes, if you have specific thoughts, that would be great. So our next question is there anything about the race that could be perceived as more difficult or unappealing for women? And I'll just let you guys kind of popcorn if you have specific thoughts and want to chime in.
Happy to chime in again. I have to say that I believe that many women I've spoken to about the race are really concerned about the combination of unsupported and being alone in the woods all night, and that's more intimidating for many women than for men. And for me, that was actually one of the best experiences about the race, of being there and feeling like I was, you know, alone on the trail, and it was an incredibly magical experience. But a lot of people I speak to find that an absolutely mortifying prospect, that, you know, that there's not an aid station, you're not necessarily going to bump into anybody, and that there are so few runners that the likelihood of you being alone for long stretches in the dark at night, it seems like a real challenge.
I'm gonna have to agree.
Go ahead.
I think that's one of the barriers, is women, especially those of us of an older generation, we were kind of taught we couldn't be self-reliant. I think that's
Yeah.
changed. And I mean, you have to be self-reliant out there. That's part of why that's why I feel so emboldened and empowered afterwards. So hopefully more people will see it as an opportunity, not as a barrier.
I think it's a huge opportunity. And then, again, a life-changing experience once you go through it. So I'd encourage everybody to treat themselves to it, even if it feels a little intimidating.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And based on some of the conversations I've had with folks, it does seem like also that intimidation factor where, you know, maybe you're not comfortable running alone. It has caused some women to not run their own race in order to stay with others. And so maybe they're, you know, maybe they're holding themselves back early on because they're trying to stay with a group, or maybe the group turns one direction and they don't necessarily feel empowered or compelled to go the other direction if they think that's the right way, that sort of thing. So it's all good considerations.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. I do agree. I think safety and being alone is probably the number one concern. I mean, even for my husband, he really wouldn't let me sign up and do this unless I had someone do it with me. So, you know, there's a spousal concern there too. You know, you're alone. You know, I would be roughly 4 hours away from home in the woods, gone all weekend long, you know, very limited service for him to check in on me. So I think that's a deterrent for some women. But again, also kind of what drew me to this, because I liked the idea of this being more of an adventure than a fully supported race. That's kind of what drew me to it. So you're going to have those that are going to want that full support. Self-supported is intimidating. I had never done anything like that before. I mean, usually if I go out for a 20 or 30 mile trail training run, I drop a car, I drop a cooler somewhere. So it's that whole mindset that I can't go more than 20 or 30 miles without having aid. Even in, you know, 100-mile races, you've got an aid station every 13, 15 miles at most. And people become dependent on drop bags. And I think that if they would just give themselves a chance to go on a 20 or 30-mile run with nothing, they realize they really don't need those drop bags. You don't need 90% of that stuff and that aid that you really think you do. And also the other thing is, you know, I was kind of chatting back and forth with a couple people I knew on the chat, the post about this. And some people I think are very unaware that you have almost 30 hours to finish this. They think that it's like 19 or 20 hours. So maybe you just make that very clear on there. You know, at the 6:30 start, you have 29 and a half hours. At the 7, you know, it was at 7 or 7:30. There's like that hour shift. You know, maybe put that out there so they know exactly how long they have, because you can power hike this. I mean, there were probably 45 or 50 miles where I didn't run at all. I just, one foot in front of the other. If you just keep moving, you can finish this.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Rebecca. You know, based on that that cutoff time, that 29 and a half hours, you only need to average like 25-minute miles.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
and there are sections that are pretty technical and that are uphill. So, you know, if you can jog in some of the flatter sections, that's definitely going to help you along. But that's something to keep in mind is, you know, you don't have to be this, you know, track racer to get through this thing. You know, in fact, that probably is going to come back and bite you later if you're going too fast. So
yeah,
slow and steady wins the race, right?
That's right.
Awesome. Did anyone else have thoughts they wanted to share before we move on to the third question? Okay, awesome. So question 3, what advice would you offer to a woman considering the race, or to anyone for that matter? So if we wanna kind of go through one by one, give, you know, 2-3 minute answer, that'd be great. Melanie, you're the first face I see on my screen, so.
I think I mentioned this when we had like an SRT call like a couple years ago, I really practiced just being uncomfortable in physical situations. And sometimes that was like trail running, but sometimes that was also just like, I like worked a really long day and I was like, okay, it's like 5 degrees outside and I'm gonna go walk to like the grocery store 2 miles away just to like be uncomfortable. And like, I think that really, really helped me. And then I know there's 2 different philosophies on this, but it helped me personally to practice sections of the course that look difficult to navigate. Because then when I was there in real life, I was like, oh, okay, the train tracks, like I know exactly where we cut off, like in the middle of the night. But I think it was you, Katie, that was saying like it was nice to have it like fresh and clean. And now parts of me wonder if it was like that, like if it would have been a very different experience. So I see both sides of that. But I think like Anna said, I loved the signing up and doing the race was one thing, but all of the preparation, like I tried out so many different snacks. Like during the 50 miler, I literally brought like apples. Like I had no idea what I was doing. And then, I really learned, okay, pretzels work really well for me if I'm feeling nauseous or like certain things like that. During the 70, I felt like the nutrition was on point because I practiced it during all of those training runs.
Yeah, that's such a good point. The nutrition is such a big part of it. I saw so many people bonking on the side of the trail that, they were running just wonderful races, setting a steady pace, and they weren't getting their nutrition in, and that's kind of the end of you. So yeah, I don't necessarily recommend not running or looking intently at the course ahead of time. That was my technique. I don't know that that would work for most people though. I think you had the right idea, Melanie. So, all right. Jaime, you're next on my screen, so I'll pass it over to you.
Hi. Let's see. Yeah, I would agree. Checking out some of the paths, especially like going in and out, the railroad tracks, I think you just mentioned. I did not do that. I definitely should have done that. I had no idea where to cross. So whomever is listening that's doing it, check out the different sections. Also that road section that you were mentioning, there was, maybe there won't be anymore, a cutoff where you kind of like, there's a tangent that you go at now, through this little field. So like learning those small sections was so helpful. Nutrition, yeah, absolutely. Paramount. Getting any type of quick calories, energy, very, very helpful. Besides that, yeah, training to be uncomfortable. I did Heiner earlier that year, and the people at the aid stations looked at me like I had 3 heads. I wouldn't take anything. I only used anything that I could carry on my person. And it was just to see, can I do this? You mentioning before, you go out for a long run, we're used to dropping a cooler, or, maybe there's a car meeting us at the other end of the trail before we, go back again. We're not used to just going out and saying, okay, yeah, we're going to go out for 4 hours, and anything that's in our pack, that's what we got. Food, water. We're out of water. I don't know. Like I would run and see if I could just go with minimal things, because I didn't know if I was going to be able to find water or when I would be able to find water. So just giving yourself the opportunity to prepare for those things that you may not necessarily expect, I think was a good leading up to it. I definitely had a bigger idea and a longer training plan than I think some of you. And so I applaud everyone who was able to just crush it with this short notice of, can I do this? And you're like, yep, I sure as heck can. And I did it and I crushed it. And I definitely went in with a big plan of, can I do this? Is this going to break me? And yeah, it didn't. And I'm thrilled. But yeah, learn your sections, train as much as possible on the course if you can, if you're close enough. Watch your nutrition. What? Oh yeah, don't use gauze. If you chafe afterwards, don't use gauze. For the love of everything good in this world, don't. It was painful. You don't think about the time when you have to take the gauze off and it's already like adhered to your body. Don't.
Yeah, it sounds like you learned that one the hard way.
Yeah,
Thank you for passing on that wisdom.
Yeah, the chafing was real and in really uncomfortable spots. And yeah, I just gauzed myself right up, and my friend Dick Vincent that lives out there, you know, brought me as soon as we finished straight to the store. I picked up gauze, slapped it right on my inner thighs, and trying to get that off was not pleasant at all. Don't do it.
Yeah, Catherine says lidocaine spray. I haven't tried that personally. It sounds like a great idea.
Lidocaine spray before you get in the shower. It'll change your life.
See, this is the wisdom we need in our lives.
Yeah, everybody leading from now is going to be golden on all this. Lidocaine spray, no gauze. That's all you really need to know now.
Awesome. Sums it up. Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate that. Let's see. It looks like we got three ladies left. And I would love to leave about 10 minutes for questions if possible. So we've got about 6 minutes to work with here. Rebecca, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so we're doing advice now. Advice.
Yeah, what advice would you offer? Yep.
Train with a heavy pack. So I vastly underestimated how heavy that pack can be for almost 30 hours. My back hurt, I think, way more than my legs did. My back started giving up, my shoulders. I did use the poles, by the way. Use poles. Your legs are gonna thank you for that. Even though some of the rocks are smooth and you don't have fantastic traction, they're gonna hold you up. Like toward the end, I was falling asleep and I would just like put my head on them. So poles, just go run. Even if you're doing a 5 or 10 mile run, put your pack on, load it up as heavy as you can. You know, some people rock. I don't do that, but even that's a good thing to do. Strengthen your back, your shoulders. This race is total body. It's not just legs. So don't underestimate cross training as well. Make sure you're lifting weights and total body strength.
Yeah, such a good point. Definitely training for resilience, not just necessarily running, is so important with this race. Yeah. Anna, do you want to go next?
Sure. There's been so much good advice. I'm going to focus on one thing that nobody has mentioned yet, and that is, as part of preparing and readying yourself for the challenging moments, right? I had thought about what am I going to do when the challenging moment really appears, and have a little plan for that. And I think Katie, you had mentioned having a mantra, and that's one thing. For me, it involved a couple of other things. I had brought an encouraging note that a close friend had written for me that I didn't open until I got to Ferguson Road when I had a bit of a challenging moment. I had some loose candy from Sweden that my niece had brought for me, which was great. And my last sort of killer tasty item that I had saved for the darkest moment was a Beard Papa's cream puff from New York City, which I did not actually have to eat. I had it at the end of the race and ate it afterwards. So that was great. But bring something special, something to make you smile when things feel a little difficult. Because somewhere in the dark, or when the sun is pounding, it's going to get a little rough. And if you have a little something to make you smile, that can just be enough to get you to push you over some little threshold.
I love that letter idea. That is so cute. I can imagine that would be incredibly inspiring in that moment.
And I was not yes, it was a surprise.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. Awesome. Thank you for that. Jessica, I think you're the last one on our list here.
I'm just gonna say, I had a whole thing planned and I totally forgot. So I kind of already mentioned it. Have the water filter. If you can, have a watch that with the mapping capabilities, but don't be completely dependent on that. Know how to read a map as well, just for when things do go on the fritz. If you don't know how to read a map, you're you're sunk out there. It's not one trail, it's multiple trails, and you have to be able to figure out which was the correct trail. And I'm probably a good example of someone who really doesn't have all that experience and everything, and I was still able to do it. So don't think that you have to have like all these ultras under your belt, or I think maybe I had 2 marathons under my belt at that point. And none of them were trail. So you can do this. Have the mantra, mine was go. And it just kept running in my head, go, go, go. And don't just bring goos and stuff like that. You need real food. It helps when you eat it. I didn't, because I had go in my head and not eat. So practice eating, even though you don't think you want to eat.
I have to get a timer to remind me to eat. And I
I've used
make
that.
myself eat, yeah.
I've used that since. I've completed a few hundred since, and that's helped. And it will keep the hallucinations away.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Jessica, that practicing the nutrition ahead of time, practicing eating, your gut needs to be trained just like your legs do. And I think a lot of people forget about that. You know, your body wants to shunt all the blood away from your GI system to bring it to your legs and your feet and, you know, your arms if you're using those poles and you have to teach it. No, we need that. We need to keep it there. So one of the things that I found to be most effective is I'll eat a full meal and then I'll go out for a run, and it'll force me to run really, really slow so that I don't feel nauseous, which is great because, you know, it's meant to be a base training run. And it also teaches my gut, like, we can run when we're full of food. That's okay. This is a thing that we do. So that's been really effective for me.
And I just wanted to also add real quick, one of my fears about this race was the wild animals. And I've now spent a lot more time in the Catskills. I finished the 3,500 mountains and everything. Yes, there's bears, there's coyotes, there's a lot of wild animals up there, but most of them want absolutely nothing to do with you, and they'll go the other direction and really not bother you. So not that it's completely safe out there, but it's not like the jungle where things are trying to kill you.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And that's something that I have brought up to me quite a bit is kind of that fear of wildlife, which luckily we live in an area where, yeah, like you said, it's just not particularly dangerous. We have very safe wildlife that's more afraid of us than we are of them. So that's where I guess you have to enact that kind of logical side of your brain to say, you know, I'm safe, even if it doesn't feel like it. So great. Well, these were awesome responses from our panelists. Really appreciate it. I do want to spend the next few minutes just kind of opening the floor for any specific questions that folks have. You can direct them at one of the panelists in particular or kind of open to any. So I will allow anyone who wants to, you can pop it in the chat. I'll read it out loud, or you can just take yourself off mute.
I can start. I have a question. So a lot of you mentioned, you know, get on the trail, train on the trail. For us who aren't local and it's not as convenient to get out there, if we could only do a couple of sections, what do you think would be the most valuable to train on?
Yeah, who wants to take it?
I'll take that because I did not step foot on the trail at all. Years ago, my husband and I had done a trail running camp. So I had seen, I think it's Minnesota. I don't remember. I don't know how to say the park. Just a small portion of it. And so I would say, based on my experience now, Sam's Point, anything after Sam's Point. So even if you did the climb up Sam's Point and hit that section after that, up on the ridge, you were up there at your lowest. And to mentally know that the ridge looks like it's just kind of going like this, it feels extremely hard because you're climbing up a couple boulders, you're running flat for about 10 seconds, what it feels like, and you're going down a couple boulders, and then you go up a couple boulders, and then you run flat, and it's relentless, and it feels like it goes on for 20 miles. And I think that was the hardest part.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, that's such a great point. I think Minnewaska was the park you were thinking of. I totally agree. That's such a technical section. It's great to get to know it. I think there's also one other section just before you get to the rail trail that's got some funky navigation stuff going on. So if you're able to get out to more than one spot, I would definitely recommend. I don't know if anyone else had trouble there. Maybe I was just delirious at that point, but
That's
it's a
towards
few
the
miles
end.
before.
Yeah, that's where
Pardon?
the map doesn't quite match. There,
Yes, yes,
it's a little
yes,
hard
exactly.
to navigate. So yeah, it's right towards the end, but that might be hard to do beforehand because it's not going to be marked at all before the race.
Right.
So
I'm
Yeah.
positive it wasn't marked for me either.
there you go. Yeah, no, right before Sam's Points, there's the South Gully Trail, and that's a pretty, I think it's, what is it, 2,000 feet over 3 miles or something, and it's just really, and that's about 40 miles into the race, and so it's a very hard slog, and doing that and then immediately afterwards getting to the section that Rebecca talks about. For me, it helped me to go and do that section a few times in advance, because I could then, in my mind, break those evil 3 miles up a little bit. But
I would just second what Anna just said. Like outside of Wordsboro, that was like the one section that I was like most grateful that I had practiced. Not necessarily because of navigation, but just because it's really, really hard. And it's just, for me, it was good to know what I was in for at that part. Like I knew eat before you get to that section because all of my energy was going to be focused on just getting up that section.
Yeah, that's really great advice. All right. Any other questions at this point?
Running? Is anyone running it again this year?
I'm going to go in again.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to pipe up. I'm Anna. I'm joining you again this year. So third time's the charm, right? So I've made it to 50 miles ish twice, and I will finish it this year.
We
Yes.
should connect. We should connect.
We should.
And to co-travel. And
Yeah.
or
Jacqueline, if
certainly for me.
you're planning to come in to run any, I'm going to try to spend some time up there this summer, so we can try to arrange, if people are going up, maybe section run together.
Yeah,
So
I live pretty close by, so we can. So it's easy for me to meet up. And this, for anybody else on the call, and if anybody listens to the recording, if you're interested in co-training or even sort of during the race, if you're somebody who thinks you might not be moving super quickly and you're a little intimidated to be there alone in the dark, I'm going to be going in, and you're welcome to. I'm happy to team up and to travel together during some of those really dark hours. Feel free to reach out.
That's great. Yeah. And I think that kind of addresses some of the concerns that have been brought up. You know, if you can find a buddy to get out with, you know, if you can connect with other women that are interested in these sorts of races, that's going to be best case scenario. So,
Melanie, what do you say? Are you coming back?
I want to come train with you guys. I don't know about running it, but
And we'll get you on board for running it. Jessica, you should come again too.
yeah, I'd love to get a group together, get some of the women that have run it before, are interested in running it together, and maybe do a training session somewhere in that region. So I'll have to talk to Ken about that offline. But if there are any other questions at this time, you know, feel free, you can pop them in the chat. You can take yourself off mute. In the meantime, I am going to go ahead and put my email into the chat. And I think with the recording that it will pop up, and those viewing the recording will be able to see it too. If not, feel free to reach out to Ken. I've told him multiple times, please share my contact info. I'm really passionate about getting more women starting this race and supporting any women that, you know, just need maybe a little bit of one-on-one feedback, just someone to kind of bounce ideas off of, if it makes sense, a training partner, you know, that kind of thing. So feel free to reach out at any time, and you know, there's a specific question or thought that you want to just talk to someone about. I love talking about trails and running, so please give me an excuse to do so. My family's sick of hearing about it. So
Hey, Katie, it's Ken. So thank you for moderating the call, and thank you to our panelists for sharing your thoughts. I thought this was a wonderful discussion. I thank you for the feedback you shared, which we'll think about. I just want to let you guys know that to me, what you have done and your attitudes are very inspiring. And I think a lot of people will be inspiring by what you've shared this evening. So on behalf of the race, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for this.
And I think with that,
opportunity.
we're at the top of the hour. So we'll see you guys on the trails.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye
Yeah.
now.